just a few days. If you're watching us, this is Joy News on Multi TV. I am Daniel Daze. Our guest today needs no introduction. Just a few days ago was his birthday, and the wishes were so many from so many quarters that he trended on social media. He's been called a lot of very kind words: seasoned statesman, astute politician. My personal favorite, the gentle giant. We're with the former president of the Republic, John Agyekum Kufuor. Mr. Kufuor, belated happy birthday, first of all.
Thank you very much. Your kind wishes.
So how was the party? We saw all the pictures. I loved your hat. It was very jaunty, if I can say that. So how was the party?
No, I was happy because around me I felt people were enjoying themselves. So many people came in and went, and I was in particular very touched by the visit from the president. Really, it wasn't in the works. I wasn't expecting him, but he dropped in, sat with me for quite some time. Then even came in to visit with my wife, who had retired. So it was the high point. I enjoyed.
It's interesting because one of the most popular pictures from that day is the two of you laughing so hard. Yes, you and the president. And the president. I kept asking myself, what were you talking about? I don't know if you remember.
But you've forgotten the president was also a member of my government then. So meaning we have been related for a very long time. We've known each other for maybe, I believe, over 50 years.
Wow.
So,
wow.
Yes.
Yeah, that's longer than I've been alive. But
so that's the thing.
So, what does a man like you think about when he's 80? How's 80 like?
Now I'm beginning to think of how 80 should be like, because, but for the fact that because of an operation I had, I'm not able to walk the way I would want to walk. I really, in terms of feelings, inner feelings, I can't tell the difference really between 80 and say when I was 60, 70. To me, it's very normal. But now, especially after yesterday and the attentions I've received from all over, I'm beginning to think, so this is how it's like. Everybody's beginning to look up to you like a grand old uncle. And so we've just started. It's a new life to me, beginning from now.
You've already shouldered so much responsibility in your life, but do you feel a bit more responsible now looking at the way people are looking at you?
As for responsibility, I've felt responsibility from way back. But now, I believe as I described myself earlier, I'm grand old uncle. Grand old uncles like consultants. They retire to give advice and occasional caution, and also reminisce, remember, recollect things. Some to amuse themselves, others to regale others with how things had been before, and then to pray that things get even better for family, friends, and society generally into the future.
That answer really captures everything we'll be talking about in the next few minutes, because we want to get some advice. We want to, get some stories about the past and have you relive some of them for us. And it reminds me of one of the birthday wishes I heard that intrigued me the most was from your former press secretary, Mr. Agyekum. He called you one of the most tolerant people he's worked with. And in his words, he led the campaign against you in 1998 for current President Kufuor. As soon as you became president, took him on board as press secretary, worked with him for 6 years, and you were always with him. What informed that decision to pick him as president?
He came to see me. He wanted to work with me. And first I signed him to Mr. late Jacob Bilante, I was the Minister of Information also, because I saw Kwabena as a newsman. But then they couldn't hit it off together, so Kwabena came back, leading us, all right, come work. My approach was that we were all in the government. It was our government. And I always wanted to feel, perhaps I was more like a coach, if I may, of a football team.
Not the captain?
No. Captain would be just the big Latin phrase, primus inter pares. Okay. No, president is not first, it's a super. It was the fielder. And so any of our party people who needed to be used, it would be the responsibility of president to see where to put him, so you get the best out of him for the team. And so when he came, and given his the good relationship, the rapport he had with the media generally, I thought he'd come close. And then he was also quite articulate, so use him to relate with the media, to get the media to work with you smoothly. So that's how.
And he satisfied you with his work?
He did well.
So let's talk about that period now, that tenure from 2001 through to 2009. So many things were introduced at the time, but what would you say stood out for you? What's the most important thing you were able to achieve as president, as coach?
I had come to government office with the economy of the state flat on its face, down, heavily weighed down with debts and interest that the nation didn't have the resources, liquid resources to service. And even were described as not credit worthy. No creditors will continue to give us credit lines to run the business of government for the nation. And so government had to quickly decide what to do to bring back the donor partners. And this was what led us to decide on the HIPIC, Highly Indebted Poor Country Initiative. It wasn't a popular move, but after surveying the field, I thought, without our taking that initiative, and since we had only 4 years to prove that we could govern, we might be worse off than what we inherited. So we decided to go the HIPIC way, and it worked. The world of credit opened up to us, because through that initiative, we quickly restored the macroeconomic stability, giving the framework to inspire confidence with partners who then extended the various facilities to us. For instance, quickly, the creditors forgave much of our interest, the interest we had to pay. And also trading partners like, say, even our own sister nation, Nigeria, came on board to supply us with a quote for refinery at Store that also enabled our filling stations to work, to get our traffic moving. And the business community at large, both from within and outside, got some confidence to begin to interact in the private sector to move.
You mentioned so many benefits of this one single decision you took,
yes.
and you are remembered for doing so many things. But if you were to point at one thing, this is my legacy, what would that be?
The legacy, I wouldn't point at just one thing. The thing was to get the economy moving. And not only that, to do these necessary social interventions that would inspire the community at large. That something good was happening and that everybody should come along and support the government to do the socio-economic movement. For instance, if you look at the health sector, time we came into office, the policy we inherited was cynically described as cash and carry. That is, if you are not well, you go to hospital and don't have money. Even if you are lucky to get a doctor that would examine you and prescribe, it will be just a sheet of paper given to you, signed by him. Go and find the medicine. If you can't buy it, you go and die. The cash and carry. And we said, no, that shouldn't be the thing for the people. So we really worked to introduce the National Health Insurance Scheme. We sent teams all over, some to East Africa and outside Africa, to see how the countries that were practicing the insurance scheme for the people would do it. And again, we managed to come up with a system that worked with a premium that was affordable.
Yeah.
We paid something like the equivalent of $7 a year for the man, wife, and children under 18. And so quickly, within a year or so, over 56% of Ghanaians prescribed. And everybody started talking national health insurance. Then along the way, we also added the free maternity care for our women folk in pregnancy.
2 years. So in doing these, what were some of the challenges that you faced? It couldn't have been easy.
Adopting that HIPIC initiative was a serious challenge because not even the cabinet could agree that we should go that way, because they thought, generally people thought it was demeaning. And then we weren't even sure that when we took the decision, the creditors would come on board and give us the respite with which, the elbow room with which to do the things that would get the government work moving. So it was
that was one of the main things, the opposition that you faced, even from within.
Yes.
So I'll use the NHIS as an example. A lot of people look at the management of that and the nation in general and say, Kufuor was one of our best presidents. And they would often compare you to people who came after you and say that the performance has not been that good after that. Would you agree?
I don't like the comparisons.
Why?
Well, of course, people should feel free to see the world as they want to see it. But I come to a situation of challenges, and the factor of time is, to me, always critical. So you come, and if you are the type given to looking for solutions, you survey the fields, what's available, what can you do, how innovative can you get, or creative. And so you use the factors at your disposal, and then you decide. The challenges I came to find included, like the HIPIC situation. I wanted to break through and use the time, very limited time at my disposal, to show results, to show that even within the tight situation of not being solvent, of not having people coming to your aid immediately, like I was challenged by some international person whose country was perceived as Ghana's development partner. So you, Ghana, we know the truth about the state of your economy. if you tell the truth about yourself, then you would feel free to come and work with you. And what was the truth I was challenged to tell? The truth was that the economy was down. The currency, for instance, by 2001 had plummeted against the dollar, which is the trading currency we use, 10,000 cedis to $1 US. And the depreciation was continuing because we weren't earning the hard currency with which to stop the slide. Agric was not performing. Cocoa, for instance, farmers had started cutting off cocoa, which had been the lifeblood of the economy for the previous 80 years or longer, to plant citrus because the farmers felt cheated. They were the most taxed citizens of our land. Of the international price for cocoa, I believe the farmer was given something like 30 to 40%. The state took 60.
The rest of it.
Once the farmer had acquired his own land and engaged his own laborers and had virtually performed without much support from. So why should the farmer pay as much as 60% of the amount that should be his?
So you believe you were facing a different set of challenges
yes.
than any other administration?
Well, the situation I met is what I'm addressing.
Of course.
And so when I looked at the whole thing, quickly said, let's go HIPC, and then followed it up with changing the ratio of sharing of the cocoa price, international price, between the state and the farmer. And we gave the farmer, I think, the bigger share, about 60%, with the state taking the smaller. And it worked. Within 3 years, the volume of produce, which was about 340 or so thousand tons, 2001, jumped to over 700,000 tons by 2004. The highest volume of cocoa produced in Ghana. And it was because of the inducement we gave the farmer. High price. We also sprayed all the farms free against with pesticides for the farmer, and also subsidized fertilizers for the farmer. So it worked. And also when we took the HIPC, debt forgiveness, the first year loan gave us, freed us from having to find something like $250 million just to service the debts we owed. You know, the solutions. You know, me, I'm a solutions-oriented person.
Yeah.
So it worked.
So what's your assessment there of the current administration?
I believe they have a plate full of challenges which they're trying to tackle radically. But given the time limits to them, it's not easy. But they are, I believe they've taken some very far-reaching steps which should be appreciated. What with the free SHS is radical and positive. And I see that talking of macroeconomic decisions too, the Ministry of Finance is also doing something. They've tried to work with the IMF and not accessing credits indiscriminately. They've used the bond market, some deftness and some profit. But it's still not easy because there's so much unemployment in the system. The international crude oil market, hasn't played too favorably in the direction of what the government really wants to do. But I still think they've managed. But point is, whereas to the generality of the people, the grassroots, say if you go to our markets, the market woman would assess the situation by the day. I go to sell today, people are not buying. That's what decides the market woman. Or the trotro driver who goes to the filling station and then he doesn't see the ex-pump price going down, all his eyes marked up a bit, and but this government, we thought it was coming to reduce. The trotro driver wouldn't look at the international markets of crude. These things are factored in. They wouldn't understand immediately that the government must think not only of now, but medium to long term as well. And that trying to manage macroeconomy would entail discipline. They have some difficult decision to take. But when you put everything together and you factor in the time factor and the impact government must make not only within but also externally, I would say on balance, government is not doing too badly, doing well.
Okay. Out of 10, you would score them?
Oh, definitely within the time frame. I would say it's over 50%.
Over 50%?
Over 50%. That's over 50%.
That's great. So you mentioned free SHS, and that's one debate that has come up. Should parents be involved in the payment? A lot of people have said it's not sustainable as it is now.
It's been sustained as of now. But you see, policies come in rounded. Along the way, without losing the target, you tweak here and tweak there to get it right. I've heard the argument that those who could pay should be made to pay. If you have just 1 year or two to launch such a program, how do you make yourself the time to say, oh, Mr. A, I look at you, the car, the way you are dressed, you should be able to pay. Mr. B doesn't look as smart as you, so perhaps he's the guy whose children should go scot-free. Everything should be laid on for them. It won't work. But the whole idea is to move our economy, or the people, not society, to the point where literacy becomes the culture, the order of the day for everybody to. So government comes in with this holistic approach. Free SHS. But then along the way, should be the managers of the policy, Ministry of Finance, Education, to see how do we ensure that those who can truly afford contribute, so we get sustainability to look after. And I believe in due course we will get to know that. But if the government has started off being nitpicking those who can afford to pay, what do you look? The informal sector of the economy is far bigger than the formal. With the formal, it's easy. Civil servants, the people in the corporate world, you can easily target them. How do you assess the people in our markets, the traditional markets, for instance?
Well, so let's look at another sector that a lot of Ghanaians assess governments by, the fight against corruption. And I'll ask you simply, do you think from where you sit, we can win this fight against corruption?
I'm on record for having said corruption was as old as Adam, and it's true. But saying that doesn't mean I'm resigned to corruption. No. There's a lot you can do. Your legal system, governance system, procurement arrangements in the public sector, freeing the media, which my government led in. The repeal of the criminal libel law. So the media, through its investigative aspects, would expose wrongdoing and that sort of thing. Before you know, normal, regular people will become careful lest they get disgraced. And so we fight corruption. But I tell you, the truly corrupt person might be a billionaire. You would be corrupt not because of need, but greed. We would have $1 billion, and yet even when he gets your last CD or dollar, he take from you, because his idea is just to keep on amassing. But they tend to be quite marginal. It's not everybody that's like that. Whereas somebody might be out of necessity, poor, hungry, hasn't got a penny, might go and pluck somebody's banana or grab somebody's goat to eat. He's caught and they say, that's corruption. We have to be careful, we differentiate. And then the solution to me really is to grow the economy. I would say create wealth. And as we grow it abundantly with employment, people earning, then the average person is not as corrupt as we make it sound. The average person doing the normal work with regular income would be careful to look after himself, his family, to live decently in affordable housing, using affordable transport, public transport or so. They will live within their means. That's not corruption. But where the economy has slumped the way it has slumped, and everybody must cut corners to live, then there's corruption everywhere, petty corruption, and then deep corruption. So we are moving, we're trying to move the economy out of the slump it's in. We're trying to create jobs. We're trying to attract investments and create wealth. Give more work to people. So that the normal human being wouldn't go the corrupt way. It would be left with the type that is perhaps naturally greedy. And then the legal system would catch them out easily and deal with them.
So governments have been criticized over the years, one government to another, of under-resourcing institutions set up to fight corruption, like SHRAJ, like the special prosecutor, the recent creation, so that they can continue with corrupt practices without sufficient scrutiny.
No, you make it sound like it's government's policy, albeit secret, to encourage corruption by resourcing what is like, as you say, special prosecutor. No. I believe governments mean it when they say they want to fight corruption, because corruption distorts everything. The only thing is the government itself, is it resourced enough to be able to make the outlays it must make? That's where the catch is. You see, government has been dependent on tax, but we hear that of all the many citizens we have, about 30 million now, only about 1.5 million pay tax. And how much tax is government able to raise to cover the government's budget to run the public sector as it should, including the policing and all? Government is not. And this is where I believe we should also welcome the policy of digitization and also the national identification exercise. So we get to know everybody. That's where we close the gap between the formal and informal sectors. And then once we know, all of us, what we are each engaged in doing, then we see that we spread the tax net. And then we wouldn't even have to perhaps overtax any quarter. I talked a short while ago of the cocoa farmer being so heavily overtaxed. So if we know what we are all doing as individual citizens, I tell you, we should be able to bear our burdens and contribute towards resourcing the state to run efficiently both the investigative authorities and the infrastructure and other social services that government must run.
But some would say that flowing from the argument of free SHS, it's about a matter of prioritization, so that if we know what the fight against corruption can gain for us, we should prioritize this and resource them as much as we can.
No doubt at all about it. But how do we get to know if we are ignorant? That's an euphemism for ignorance, illiteracy. So perhaps the topmost priority should be empowering the people with knowledge, with education. So education, educated people tend to be the type that know their circumstances, and they can then join in as robust factors to tackle corruption. But if you say corruption and the people are ignorant, the one-eyed man within the system would always dribble around and get cheat. Or you don't agree?
Oh, well, it's not really from my opinions that people are watching it.
No, but we are conversing.
Yes, yes.
And we are both citizens, so we should seek out. To me, a priority should be education. Let the people know. And we talk transparency, and we talk accountability. It's when you know that you can exact accountability from governments.
Well, some would also say that, since you asked me, some would also say that if we get enough money back, with over 5 billion Ghana cedis that was disallowed by the Auditor General at the beginning of 2017. If we were able to raise such money as well, couldn't we fund all the education drives that we want to fund and educate as many people as we want?
The $5 billion the Auditor General disallowed, did you see it as a stack of money sitting there to be used?
Oh, no, of course not.
But that's the point. And it took, I'm sure, a smart, knowledgeable, well-informed Auditor General's department to expose where we could make things more efficient. But generally across the board, educated society is a more rational polity than a largely ignorant society. That's my point of view. So education, to me, without compromise, should be given priority.
Finally, on the subject of corruption, some would say that the way political parties are funded really feeds into this grand corruption that you were talking about, so that the political parties are not raising enough money themselves to fund their campaign activities. They may have to rely on contractors, rich men who would want to take their pound of flesh.
It's, I would say, a phenomenon of governance. Political parties, if you like, are a necessary evil. Necessary evil in the sense that it's the choice of the people to go democratic. And in current times, you cannot exercise democracy without parties. In ancient times, in Grecian times, every citizen could go to the market square to participate in how the city-state could be governed. Now, how do you govern a country of 30 million people? With all due respect, large measures of illiteracy, unemployment, tribalism, for a lot of factors that militate against sound and efficient governance. How do you do it without parties? You need the parties to, but then that's representative government I'm talking about. But then how do you organize the parties without the resources again? We want democracy. We've decided through our constitution on multi-party democracy. How much is the state contributing to realize these parties that are needed to advocate for the people, needed to research, to identify the challenges facing the society that must be tackled through governance to solutions? How do we get the resources for the government and the opposition and the checks and balances system to work So we extract accountability, we extract transparency. We make the governors, we put them on the spot to know that the people are watching and that they will be exposed without the parties. The state does not contribute. And since we all want accountable governments, so if I care so much about that, and I say I do not believe in the ideology, the other side is, I would find resources to put into my side. The foot soldiers, as we call them, the others calling into radio stations these days and television stations to argue, how do we maintain them? How do we resource them? The media, the costs of advertising in the media, all these are serious factors. Unfortunately, the state isn't contributing to this. And yet the people say that's the type of government they want. Elsewhere, go to the so-called more developed parts of the world. Go to the United Kingdom. Go to the United States. United Kingdom, there's no pretension about it there. Both the people of the right, they know they must fund a party like the Tories. So the Confederation of British Industries, from long ago, they decide they support that party. And everybody knows when the Tories come to power, they bring in the policies that the businesses will be comfortable with, the corporate world will be comfortable with. If you want to call that corruption, they will tell you that's how they will create the wealth to make life better for everybody. The leftists support labor, and the unionists, their headquarters, the transport house. They would, however they do, collect their resources to back labor. They will do it because they believe it's when labor comes in that they get that social justice they stand for. So it happens there. In America, it's the same.
Very true, but then
yeah,
it's open. In systems like that, because it's open and people know, here, even some of the contributions are not in the audited
trouble
accounts.
is, and this is where we have to be careful with the comparisons. We are just beginning. We are a very young society. And then because of the way we throw words about, people are forced to go underground. And anything that's covered up tends to breed dangers. So what I'm trying to say is that party system, how parties are funded, perhaps we need a more open and honest argument, debate on how to help these parties, which are very necessary agencies to use for education, for organization, to make people take positions on how to govern our society. We are not doing that enough.
Since we are on the party system, let's talk about your party, the NPP. So, two key figures in your party's history since it was created has been your very good self and current president, Kufuor. It seems to be like a handing over of a baton of sorts. And first of all, we talked a bit about how Mr. Agyekum worked with you so well. How did Agyekum, even though he campaigned for Mr. Kufuor, how did Mr. Kufuor work with you?
Kufuor was I appointed him Attorney General, first instance. He did what he could. And in due course, I moved him to Foreign Ministry, and we worked very well. Till 2007, when, as I was about to leave the scene, so many of my ministers wanted to also go and contest to become candidates for presidency. And I thought that was going to collapse the government as a whole, because as many as 12 of them wanted to become candidates. And if you want to be candidates, it means you have to go around canvassing into the country, and I didn't think they could hold their ministerial positions at the same time, go about trying to become candidates. So I requested them to step down. But even after they stood down, I related well with all of them. Because I knew ambition is the essence of politics. So I understood.
That was an interesting conversation at the background there, and Daniel Datse speaking to the former president, John Agyekum Kufuor, and it was an interview that coincided with his 80th birthday celebration. He had a big, a massive party. It was attended by a number of personalities, including the President of the Republic, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. Well, many of the pictures also are being shown, especially on the handles, but also on the pages of the president and the presidency. But in the meantime, though, we have to try to wrap up the show. And we have to bring you the entertainment side of our show, which is AM Showbiz. It's brought to you by Agyekum Purified Water. And Becky is around here after traveling all the way from Dubai in the Middle East to come to Ghana. So please, stay with us.